Witches have walked this earth since the dawn of time, eternal and unyielding, standing at the pinnacle of a world steeped in sorcery. The first among them, the fabled Origins, 17 in all, wove the fabric of magic itself, passing on their boundless power to generations that followed. To some, the touch of a witch's magic is a blessing, a light in the darkness. But for others, it is a curse, as merciless and inescapable as chains. Breaking such a curse is no simple feat, in which two paths exist. One must either seek the kiss of their true love or hope that, on a whim, the witch herself chooses to release it. One day, a short-tempered and impulsive girl named Guido and her mage partner Ashaf arrive in a town in pursuit of a witch as instructed by the Order of Magical Resonance. The mission gets Guido pumped, as she's also looking for a specific witch for personal reasons. But at the same time, she doesn't know if this town has the witch she's looking for. The duo asks the people around the train station about the witch, and they end up getting introduced to a girl who seems to know about witches more than the average citizen. Surprisingly, the girl instantly knows who Guido is looking for, even though Guido never gave her the witch's description. She speaks about the witch with great excitement. According to her, everyone in town also knows this famous witch. As if summoned by fate itself, a deafening commotion erupts outside. The ground trembles beneath the weight of chaos, and a monstrous magical beast in the shape of a shark tears through the streets. The police force rallies in a desperate bid to bring the creature down with fire weapons, but to no avail. But then, a woman suddenly arrives. She is Ione, the renowned witch whose name was spoken with awe by the girl. With a single, devastating attack, Ione brings the rampaging beast down. The beast returns to its human form, and the police waste no time in seizing the cursed individual. All the while, the townspeople erupt into a thunderous cheer. Ashaf experiences a bit of culture shock. Usually, witches are feared or despised, not adored by the masses. The girl from the station even calls Ione a hero. Not only that, the girl is actually Ione's apprentice. That explains why she admires Ione so much. Well, clearly Guido isn't happy about it. Before anyone can blink, she lunges at Ione, launching a furious assault, only to be overpowered almost effortlessly. As the authorities haul her away, she rants, insisting that Ione must remember her. However, Ione doesn't show the slightest hint of recognition. Suddenly, a horde of crows appears, driving the officers away. In the middle of those crows, Ashaf appears, coming to Guido's rescue. He calmly explains the situation to the girl from the station, asserting that they actually mean no harm and just want to have a little business with Ione. He then takes the furious Guido away from the scene. A few moments later, the pair shows up in front of Ione's castle. Ashaf tells Guido a story from 400 years ago, when an evil witch was accused of burning the town with hellfire. As soon as the evil witch was defeated, the cursed hellfire was sealed away in that exact castle. In the middle of their conversation, a group of young women arrive at the castle. According to them, they're going to celebrate a historic day in the castle. Then suddenly, the station girl comes out from the castle to open the gate, letting the women inside. Seeing Guido and Ashaf, she's obviously furious. After what Guido did to Ione, of course, she won't let them get near Ione again. Ashaf doesn't feel like challenging her, but before he and Guido leave, he asks her what historic day they're celebrating. However, strangely, even the girl doesn't know. Nobody knows about it except for Ione herself. Back in their hotel, Ashaf looks up the true history of the town, including the witch, where the hellfire is sealed, and most importantly, the meaning of today's date. After learning all that, he decides that they need to get serious. There's also a good chance that Ione is really the one Guido is looking for. The pair then gets ready for the battle. Meanwhile, somewhere in Ione's castle, the station girl wakes up in the middle of a flower field. A chill washes over her as she realizes her hands and feet are gone. She looks around to find the other girls are in a similar state, except they're still unconscious. The station girl can't do anything but scream in fear. At that very moment, Ione steps into view. While she's performing a ritual on one of the girls, she reveals the truth. She has put spells on all of them so that they can be used as a key to release the hellfire. It turns out that the evil witch in the town's history was Ione's own grandmother. The truth is, she was far from malevolent. As a matter of fact, she even saved the town by sealing the hellfire. Ione can't forgive what the town did to her grandmother, so for 120 years, she has been preparing for this day when the seal finally weakens. Once Ione finishes telling the story, the first lock of the seal finally comes undone. Hellfire blasts from within the earth, scorching the town. Suddenly, from the shadows outside, Guido crashes through a castle window, her eyes burning with fury as she charges straight for Ione. But just like before, she's still inferior to Ione in terms of strength. Ione also quickly senses Ashaf approaching from the other side of the room and immediately tackles him, preventing him from rescuing the girls. Just as Ione is about to continue her ritual, Guido stands back up. In anger, she shows Ione a witch's curse mark on her neck. She strongly believes that Ione was the one who did it to her. Hearing that, Ione sneers. Unfortunately for Guido, Ione isn't the one she's looking for. Therefore, she can't break the curse no matter how. Ione proceeds to attack Guido with a ball of fire. Despite being weaker than Ione, Guido is extremely resilient. She still manages to stand up and run toward Ione. But again, Ione swiftly counters, summoning a massive, jagged thorn that pierces through Guido's body, stopping her in her tracks. As Guido is pinned there, a Shaf makes a revelation. Indeed, in order to break the witch's curse, one must either kiss a Prince Charming or have the witch who gave it break it themselves. However, there's actually another way, and that is a kiss with a witch. Guido grins. Before Ione can react, Guido seizes her, pulling her close and pressing her lips against Ione's in a sudden kiss. Suddenly, the coffin that a Shaf has always been carrying starts to react violently. From inside it emerges a massive, monstrous figure, a male beast radiating raw power. Ione immediately realizes that he's Guido's true form. Frantically, Ione starts to attack Guido with any type of magic technique she can do. But the table has turned now. Guido keeps standing still. Eventually, without requiring anything but a single punch, he finishes Ione off. A few moments later, the fire in the town is finally dying, and Guido is back to her usual female form. Apparently, the third way of breaking the curse, which is kissing a witch, only works temporarily. Guido still needs to find the real witch who put the curse on her. Guido and Ashaf continue taking jobs from the Order. One of their next missions is to tame a wild beast owned by a rich man. However, since there's no witch involved, Guido pays no interest in it. It is a Shaf who does all the work. Later, when they're having lunch, Guido grumpily complains about the missions they've done since the incident with Ione, which included apprehending a petty thief who abused magic, eliminating a tree beast, catching a stalker, babysitting a magical beast, and more trivial jobs. All of this has led them to no witch. Guido isn't even one step closer to her goal. She thinks that there's no point in joining the Order if this is how it goes. But in Ashaf's defense, incidents involving witches are not particularly common. Suddenly, the waiter approaches and hands them a letter, a message from the Order. As soon as Ashaf finishes reading the letter, he says to Guido that their next mission is going to be exciting. So with her heart racing, Guido comes to their next stop along with Ashaf, to an old woman's apartment. The first thing she does upon arriving is accuse the old woman of being a witch. However, she turns out to be wrong. The old woman is actually just their client, who called the Order to help her open a magically locked chest. Needless to say, the mission goes smoothly, but Guido just becomes more enraged at Ashaf for fooling her. A month has passed after that, and still, Guido hasn't met any witches. She and Ashaf are having lunch again when the waitress gives them an envelope from the Order. At first, Guido is skeptical about this, thinking that it will be no more than a petty job. However, Ashaf points out that the envelope is black. In the Order, black envelopes signify cases involving witches. According to the letter, in the city of Hayden in Ferres, a witch is committing serial killings. At night in the aforementioned city, investigator Kiera Haynes has been called to check the crime scene. So far, the witch has killed at least 5 victims. 3 of the corpses are hanged grotesquely in front of a cryptic message written in blood. Just by looking at the scene, Haynes can conclude that whoever did that must not be sane. Hayden Police Force itself is relying on her to solve this case. She's also the only mage the force has. After discussing a few things with her co-worker, she walks home alone. On her way, she walks past Guido and Ashaf. They're deliberately talking about the case to catch Haynes' attention, and it works. Haynes stops and asks them who they are, and why are they talking about the case in a way that makes them seem to know about Haynes. Ashaf is the first one to talk, confirming that they indeed know Haynes, and they've been sent by the Order to assist her. Hearing that, Haynes immediately takes them to a restaurant to talk privately. She puts up a barrier to prevent anyone from interfering. Then Ashaf starts to do the talking, asking everything she knows about the case so far. However, Haynes is still skeptical about the duo. She asks Ashaf back why should she trust them. Initially, Ashaf tries to explain calmly, pointing out the fact that the mayor of Hayden doesn't want this case to end up being handled by the Paladin Corps, which is the international military force built for dealing with large-scale crimes involving magic. However, Guido grows impatient. She blatantly says that this is for the sake of finding the witch who cursed her, to take revenge. Hearing that, Haynes decides to trust them. For her, personal reasons like that are more believable than something sugar-coated such as for justice. She then tells them to meet her again tomorrow morning in that shop. So, the next day, they meet as promised. Haynes drives the two to a seemingly important place, and on their way, she reveals some facts regarding the witch-related murder cases she has encountered. One thing she knows is that witches always leave a hint that they're witches. A particular hint always echoes in her mind. It goes, "I live and never change. I bear child after child and never change." This clearly refers to witches, as they don't grow old even though they can live up to 200 years and their power is passed on to their children. Haynes realized that all the riddles were references from a specific book, and now she's taking Guido and Ashaf to the bookshop that sells that book. As they arrive, a nauseating stench hits them like a wave. They cover their noses and step cautiously into the shop, only to be met with a grisly scene. The shop owner has been brutally murdered. Traces of magic linger around the injury, confirming that only a witch could be responsible for it. This twisted scene strengthens Haynes' belief that it's all just a game to the witch. In a somber tone, she coldly tells Ashaf to stay away from her, as people around her usually don't meet good ends. Suddenly, she gets a call from her co-worker, who reports another murder case somewhere in a different part of town. The killer has left another cryptic message. This one reads, "I am disease. Disease propagates and spreads." Later at night, Haynes drops off Guido and Ashaf. Unfortunately, they didn't get any leads today, but it's not like Haynes expected much either. As she drives away, Guido notifies Ashaf about the powerful presence she's feeling. Then, without warning, a thick cloud of purple smoke erupts out of nowhere. When the smoke begins to settle, a masked figure shows themselves in front of Ashaf. Guido wastes no time. She lunges forward, aiming to strike the stranger from behind. The figure immediately transforms into purple smoke and vanishes into thin air. Guido then reveals to Ashaf that she sensed this presence for a while. A few moments later, the pair approach Haynes in front of the police station. After telling her what just happened, Ashaf gives her a very blunt question. What's her relationship with the witch? Because it seems that the witch is following her and targeting the people around her. Well, Haynes also wants to know the answer to that question. She seems genuinely clueless about everything. However, there's something that comes to her mind which she thinks could be the beginning of this series of incidents. One night, Haynes was about to leave work when she received heart-shattering news that her house was engulfed in flames. She raced to the scene, desperately hoping to save her two adopted sons, Shulk and Lauren, but sadly, she was too late. The perpetrator of the arson left a message on the wall saying the riddle that Haynes always remembers. "I live and never change. I bear child after child and never change." Sometime later, Haynes and her fellow officers prepared to face the witch, huddled together inside Haynes' barrier. Tension arose as the witch began to show their presence by emitting purple smoke. All of a sudden, Reuben, Haynes' colleague and lover, made a reckless decision. He stepped out of the safety of the barrier, determined to confront the witch by himself. Reuben ended up having his head smashed with a huge block of concrete and died on the spot. Now that Haynes thinks about it, it seems pretty obvious that the witch is obsessed with her. This might also mean that she has a chance at taking revenge. With all the pain she has endured up until now, she just can't let it go, even though it might be wrong. Suddenly, from the window of the police station, Haynes' co-worker shouts, informing her that the witch just sent them a letter. It says that they're coming to the station in 3 days. Therefore, 3 days later, the police force as well as Guido and Ashaf gather in front of the station, preparing to capture the witch. After a few minutes of delay, the witch finally shows up on the roof of the station. They start strong, unleashing a powerful blast that fills the air with thick purple smoke, which makes the visibility very limited. The police can't even see their allies properly. In just a few seconds, several officers are already down. The witch then vanishes again. Ashaf, calm as always, reveals that he's found the witch's hideout. He had secretly released his crows across the town earlier. Ashaf can see what his crows can see, so no matter where the witch goes, they can't escape from Ashaf's sight. Therefore, he, Guido, Haynes, and the Force decide to go to the witch's hideout. In the hideout, the witch takes off his mask, revealing the face of a young boy. Unbeknownst to him, Guido has been perched silently on the windowsill, ready to strike. With a surge of confidence, she leaps forward to attack. However, her momentum is suddenly halted by a presence on her right, assaulting her with the smoke until she flies out of the room. It turns out that there are 2 of them, but more importantly, they're not real witches. Once the smoke clears, the 2 figures step forward, facing Guido and Ashaf. And then comes the true shock. Standing before Guido and Ashaf are Shulk and Lauren, Haynes' sons. The very boys Haynes believed had perished in the fire. Haynes frantically questions why they're there. A horrifying possibility flashes through her mind, but she doesn't want to believe it. Unfortunately, it seems to be true. Shulk and Lauren are the very witches responsible for the grotesque murders that have terrorized the town. Ashaf points to the books they're holding. They're grimoires, a type of forbidden instruments that lets non-witches gain the power of witches on the condition that the users regularly feed them with human lives. Otherwise, grimoires will eat their own users. To defend themselves, Shulk says that they accidentally came upon the books on Haynes's desk. Ever since they touched the books, they must feed it for their entire lives. They're basically hanging on to their lives by murdering people, but the others don't fall for their alibi. The brothers' killing methods show that they enjoy what they're committing. Haynes is especially mad at the fact that they killed Ruben, a person who loved them. Lauren is about to defend himself again, but he starts coughing blood because apparently they didn't feed the book enough lives. The officers they thought they killed were just dummies created by Ashaf. But the two brothers still aren't deterred. They believe they can do anything as long as they hold the books. However, they are gravely mistaken. With a swift movement, Guido manages to hurt their wrists, causing them to drop off the books. Then she continues to punch the two in the face really hard to the point they're barely recognizable. In anger, Haynes asks them why they pretended to be witches. Their answer strikes her like a blow. In their twisted perception, Haynes is not a mother. She is just a woman. They claim to have feelings for her, which is why they couldn't allow anyone to come near her. Without giving any comment about that, Haynes picks up the rifle from the ground, ready to shoot her once-beloved sons while they're begging for their lives in a pathetic way. Although she used to love them, she now doesn't even have pity for them. Finally, without a second thought, she pulls the trigger. A few days later, Guido and Ashaf stand at the train station, preparing to leave the city. The grimoires are now safe in Ashaf's hands. Haynes approaches, coming to send them off. She questions how those books got on her desk as she doesn't even remember ever seeing them before. But according to Ashaf, the forbidden instruments have their own will, so they can appear anytime and anywhere to those who should possess them. That might have been the case with Shulk and Loran. Ashaf also assures Haynes that she did the right thing by shooting them, since death, by getting consumed by the instruments, would be way more agonizing than that. Finally, Haynes says goodbye and part ways with Guido and Ashaf. Sometime later, the pair can be seen doing a mission in another town. As they wrap up their work, a chaotic scene happens to unfold in front of them. Two officers seem to be chasing a criminal. With Guido's raw strength, she manages to tackle the criminal, making him unconscious. The officers approach Guido to give their thanks. One of them is named Jeff Enker. He explains that the criminal is an undead, a person who has been resurrected through necromancy after meeting their death. Necromancy itself is legal in that town under strict rules. 1. The necromancer or the practitioner must have the permission of the resurrected or their families. 2. The necromancer must inform the resurrected regarding the necromancy process because there's also a huge risk that comes with it. However, this criminal seems to be an illegal one as he's not registered. Their practitioner must have not maintained him for a while, leaving him to descend into madness. Enker also adds that there have been a lot of berserk undead cases lately. Unfortunately, necromancy is out of Guido and Ashaf's specialty, so there's not much they can do. However, Ashaf does know people in the Order who are experts in this. Therefore, the next thing we know, the Order's top necromancers, Fenora and Johan, seemingly her assistant, are called to the city. As soon as they arrive, they meet with Enker to talk about the case. Enker reveals that since 2 months ago, 6 undead have been found going berserk. None of them are registered. The police also haven't found who resurrected them. So now their top priority is to find their practitioner. Based on that explanation, Fenora herself thinks that there's a possibility that they're strays, which refers to the undead who get resurrected illegally and receive no explanation, unaware that they have been dead. Before the two parties continue with their investigation, Enker hands over the data of the addresses, movements, and contact information of all undead and their necromancers in the region to Fenora. Apparently, there are a total of 4 necromancers and 21 registered undead in the region. Later, they regroup at an abandoned church far from the center of the town. Fenora plans to lure the undead that has lost their minds. Right now, she carrying a special lantern. To humans' eyes, it looks like a regular lantern that has no light. But to undead's eyes, it emits light brighter than anything, attracting them. It shines even from a distance, so it might tell them how many other illegal undead left. Moments later, a horrifying sight unfolds as the undead begin to swarm around the church, their numbers far surpassing anyone's expectations. They're like zombies, acting on sheer instinct with no sense left. Within mere seconds, they manage to break the windows. Johan has no choice but to fight all of them alone, bringing them to their deaths for the 2nd time. Once Johan's finished dealing with them, Fenora tells Enker an important piece of information. There are 3 modes of undead based on their practitioner's will. The first one is auto, a state where the undead can act freely of their own will. The second one is semi-auto, In this state, the undead still has intact consciousness, but their practitioner imprints an objective on them. The third one is called manual, where the undead is completely controlled by their practitioner. According to Fenora, the undead there must be on auto mode as manual and semi-auto. Undead can't just run away that easily due to their practitioner's control. This makes Fenora wonder why their practitioner created them and then let them roam freely in the wild. Enka's assistant also points out a bizarre fact. These undead are mostly red-haired women. The group then tries to retrace the footsteps of those undead. Moments later, they arrive at a mansion in the middle of the forest. Driven by curiosity, Johan cautiously peeks into the shed. Then, without warning, a towering large undead comes out of the shed and attacks him. Afterward, a fully controlled manual undead steps into view. With an eerie composure, she greets them, her voice an extension of her practitioner's will. She orders them to go inside. To threaten them, the master sends out a woman Enka knows very well. She was Enka's lover who died before Enka could marry her. Enka was against resurrecting her because he didn't want to see her becoming a monster. But now, there she is, standing in front of him coldly without consciousness. The master also commands the big undead to slit Johan's throat. Knowing that Johan is very important to Fenora, the master promises to let her see Johan again if she does what he says. Fenora and Enka are left with no choice but to enter the mansion. They're guided by the undead to see their masters. Meanwhile, the big undead brings Johan's body into the shed, from the entrance to the practitioner's room. Fenora and Enka see a lot of red-haired maids who seem to be undead as well. Once they enter the room, Enka is furious at the necromancer for doing that to those women. He points out to Fenora that he must have an accomplice, as controlling that many undead must require great power. However, Fenora says that it's possible to do it alone, considering that the work he's done is very crude, requiring little to no maintenance. The girls there must also be empty inside. Fenora believes that all of them are semi-auto strays. This makes Fenora feel pity for them. She then explains to Enka that the dead must pay a hefty price for resurrection. Normally, after every death, the human soul flows to the vortex of samsara to prepare for reincarnation. However, necromancy snatches a soul and puts it back into its body, preventing it from being reborn. Of course, resurrection is not eternal. One day, the soul will face its second death. When that time comes, the snatched soul can't go back to the vortex. Instead, it wanders aimlessly in the void for eternity. This means that all the undead, without exception, will end up there and never be reborn. Hearing that, Enka looks at his former fiancée and realizes that the same fate will also befall her. He gets even more furious at the necromancer, questioning why he's doing that. In response to that, the necromancer begins telling his story. He once had a lover named Millet. Everything about her was beautiful, especially her bright red hair. However, she tragically died in a fire. For him, resurrecting her was one thing, but regrettably, most of her skin had been burned. It wasn't possible for him to recreate Millet's beauty that was once hers. Therefore, the necromancer collected red-haired women and performed resurrection on them for the sake of improving his skills and finding a more beautiful body for Millet. The successful ones became his maids. As for the failures, they were left underground. The necromancer now dares to suggest the unthinkable, that Fenora should become the new vessel for Millet. He gestures for his two maids to seize her, but before they can lay a hand on Fenora, she transforms, unveiling herself as a witch. The necromancer stumbled back, eyes wide with shock. He thought Fenora was just a regular necromancer, not a witch. He knows that Fenora is going to attack him anytime soon, so he reminds her of Johan, who's now sitting lifelessly in the shed, and threatens to burn Johan's body to ashes so that he can't be resurrected. However, she remains unfazed. Ominously, she says that Johan can't be used as a hostage, so nothing can stop her from attacking. Hearing that, the necromancer pulls out his trump card. With a snap of his fingers, he confidently summons an army of undead ready to fight her. But his confidence shatters in an instant because Fenora also has her very own legion of Death Knights. She gives only one order to them, not to touch Enka. Other than that, she lets them do anything they wish to the necromancer and the other undead. Within a few minutes, the Death Knights manage to slash all the undead in the room without sparing anyone. As for the necromancer, he's run away toward the room where he's keeping Millet's body. He vents his anger, getting more determined to get Millet a more beautiful and stronger body. But then, a voice speaks from behind him. He turns around, and Johan is there, as alive as ever. The shock is apparent on the necromancer's face. He was so sure that Johan was dead. In response, Johan says that he's always been dead, meaning he's an undead himself. On top of that, he's also a witch. He doesn't need Fenora's help to resurrect him since he can heal his own wound from the beginning. The necromancer frantically begs for his life. believing that Johann is going to kill him. However, Johann says that he's not going to do it, as killing him would be letting him off easy. Moments later, Johann is seen standing in front of the necromancer's body, whose skin has been flayed and fingers have been cut off, clearly having been tortured. Yet somehow, he still clings to life. Soon after, Fenora and Enka then enter the room. Fenora then pulls out a gun. She turns to Enka and forces him to agree to a contract spell, preventing him from saying a word to anyone about what she's going to do. Enka has no other option, as that's the rule from the order. Therefore, Fenora shoots down the necromancer. Later on, the necromancer jolts awake outside before Fenora and Johann. Fenora announces that all of his undead will be maintained properly, and he is expected to perform his duties without question. The realization hits the necromancer like a bolt of lightning. He's been resurrected as one of the very undead he once commanded. The others don't care about it, as that's the least punishment he deserves. Finally, the last thing Fenora does to the necromancer is pierce his head with her nails as an act of revenge for hurting Johann. Now we return to Guido and Ashaf. They're having a meal when Ashaf reveals that he just got another letter from the Order, the one with the black envelope. It seems that there's another series of witch-related murders in the city of Pontiverne. However, this mission comes with a twist. This time, Paladin Corps is likely to stand in their way. Guido and Ashaf's job is to make sure the Order catches the witch before the Corps. In other words, it's a race for the witch. Sometime later, the duo arrives in Pontiverne, right when the citizens are being evacuated. The entrance to the city is also being guarded by the Corps, but thanks to Ashaf's ingenuity, the pair managed to bypass the guards easily. Meanwhile, the Paladin Corps have set their base afloat above the city. Lieutenant Colonel Matt Kugat, who just got back from chasing the witch on his own, enters the base. He's in a sulky mood because he accidentally let the witch slip out of his hands, but he's planning to face them again. He then sits on the throne. A person standing beside him reminds him not to kill the witch, as that's not the true mission. Seeing that person, one of Kugat's subordinates, Farmus, questions who he is. Lowell, another Corps soldier, answers that he's a representative of the Global Holy Church, as well as the first person who investigated this witch and discovered the case. It also seems that he possesses critical information regarding the witch. In the meantime, Guido and Ashaf need to find a way to get through the barrier placed by the Corps. It's not an easy matter because if they mess with the barrier, the Corps would surely know. Thankfully, Ashaf is an expert in this area. He has mastered the technique of opening a hole in a barrier without being noticed. However, it does take some time. Suddenly, in the middle of Ashaf's spells, somebody gets pinned with several swords right in their direction. From afar, a fleeting movement of a girl sprinting away catches their eye. Guido grins, realizing that she's the witch they're looking for. The witch's name is Helga Velvet. She seems to have a specialty in manipulating swords. The Corps keeps sending clones of their soldiers to her, but she easily defeats them. The first wave of clones they sent was completely wiped out. In the Corps' base, the mysterious man tells Kugat weirdly specific information about Helga, such as her height, hair color, preference for clothes, and how her bag looks. This makes Kugat slightly suspicious. He wonders if the man knows her lineage as well. Before the man can answer that, Kugat's subordinate suddenly reports the Corps tracking squad has been taken down. Little do they know that it was Guido's doing. She stirred up trouble just to draw Helga out. The moment Guido spots Helga, she launches an attack and demands Helga remember her face. But Helga can only stare in confusion as she's never seen Guido before, much less knowing what she's done to her. So once again, Guido comes across the wrong witch. Regardless, the two continue their fight because Guido has to buy time for Ashaf. A few moments later, Ashaf is finally ready. He approaches Helga and performs a compression spell on her, trapping her entire existence in a ball. Interestingly, Ashaf says that he knows what witch she is based on her ultoma, the mark that appears when a witch uses their power. Coincidentally, the Corps is also talking about it in their base. According to the mysterious man, she's the weakest witch he knows. However, she's the only witch whose ultoma is shaped like swords. This means that she's the descendant of the Dauntless Witch, Quena Velvet. All of her lineage is purposefully weak in battle. While Helga herself is the weakest, she possesses a weapon that can destroy the entire world, the demon sword Ashkan. To its owner, the sword grants the power to rule the world. However, to anybody else, it brings nothing but destruction. Hearing that information, Kugat quickly gets up and orders his subordinates to mobilize as many squads as possible. Kugat himself is going for her as well. But before he goes, he whispers to Farmus to ask him to monitor the mysterious man as he feels there's something shady about him. Meanwhile, not long after Ashaf traps Helga, she manages to break the spell, escaping from the ball. It turns out that the power of the demon sword she's carrying is so immense that Ashaf's spell can't contain it. And now the pair has to hide from the furious Helga. Well, in the end, Helga manages to find them. As usual, Ashaf steps forward, taking charge of the explanations. He calmly reassures Helga that they did all of this to bring her somewhere safe for a private discussion. He's also careful to emphasize that he's not with the core. In fact, he's willing to help her escape from them. Before Helga can respond, Ashkan, the sword, unexpectedly chimes in, urging Helga to trust Ashaf and go along with his plan. However, Helga still finds it hard to believe Ashaf's words. Suddenly, the second wave of the core squads appears, trying to attack them with bursts of fireballs. Ashaf quickly builds a barrier, shielding himself and Guido from the assault. He also tells Helga to get behind the barrier, but she hesitates. No matter how much Ashkan persuades Helga, in the end, she still decides to go alone. She keeps running and running, slashing every Paladin Core soldier's clone on her way. As she makes a turn, she feels a strong, cold presence. Before her, Kugat is walking in her direction, determined not to let go of her this time. But then Guido bursts onto the scene, coming to Helga's rescue. It seems as if she's prepared to kiss Helga so that she can transform into her true form. However, Ashaf is against that. He contacts her through telepathy and reminds her to only unleash her true power when all her trump cards have been used. Besides, their goal is to capture Helga safely. There's no need to do that yet. Therefore, Guido orders Helga to run away while she faces Kugat, buying her some time. Without questioning anything, Helga does as Guido says. Guido then turns to face Kugat, attempting to assault him. However, with his great elemental power that lets him control ice, Kugat is a lot stronger than Guido can handle. In the end, he's able to tackle her easily. A few moments after that, Kugat also manages to catch up with Helga. He forms a large iceberg in the air on top of her and then drops it. As a result, Helga gets injured and separated from Ashkan. As soon as she comes to her senses, Ashkan is already secured by Kugat. Helga knows that she's no match for him, so she tries to think of a way to get Ashkan back. Good for her, Guido suddenly comes and kicks Kugat in the face, so fast that he doesn't have time to protect himself with his ice. However, it's not enough to help Helga because suddenly Lowell also comes to the scene. Guido tries to hold on to Ashkan as tight as she can. After moments of struggle, she releases Ashkan, throwing it far away. Helga watches in shock. Her heart races as she bolts toward the sword. However, the core clone soldiers are faster. They snatch it up before she can reach it. It doesn't last long though, because eventually, Guido reclaims Ashkan. She then commands Helga to follow her to regroup with Ashaf. Helga has no choice but to comply because Guido has Ashkan with her. Suddenly, as they're running, a wave of ice starts to chase them. To escape it, Helga creates a flying device out of a sword and takes Guido with her. They think they're safe for a while. But then, Helga's expression shifts from relief to sheer terror. Before them looms a colossal ice monster. This time there's truly no way they can evade it. In that instant of impending doom, memories flood back with vivid clarity in Helga's mind. Helga had always loved every bit of Pontivert, from the climate and the food to the men. However, that changed until a few days ago when she saw the news regarding the serial homicide on the TV. 6 people were killed, and coincidentally, all of them were the people she met the previous day. She quickly thought that Ashkan was involved in it. But then again, Ashkan was sealed, so he couldn't do anything as long as she didn't draw him out. And now, Helga, who's trapped in the ice alongside Guido, feels Ashkan's call echoing, urging her to draw him. He insists that it's the only way Helga can live, but Ashkan's persuasion ends up futile. Kugat eventually picks him up and covers him with ice. The core themselves proceed to place binding armor on Helga and Guido. Suddenly, Ashaf shows up. Seeing him, Kugat quickly builds an ice wall, allowing the rest of the core to take the 2 girls to their base without Ashaf's interference. Kugat then attacks Ashaf, trying to freeze him with ice. However, before he freezes Ashaf as a whole, Ashaf begins to speak. He points out the peculiarity of Helga's serial homicide case. These strange things might suggest that Helga was set up, framed for something she didn't do, and the ones who did it were mostly the executioners. They're the counterpart of Paladin Core, witch-hunting specialists who would target witches by any means necessary, regardless of whether they're right or wrong. Hearing that, Kugat immediately thinks of one person, the representative from the global holy church. It finally comes to Kugat's realization that he's an executioner. Meanwhile, in the core's base, Ashkan, who got encased in ice, suddenly bursts free. The moment it happens, Helga's heart races with panic. She desperately tries to warn the core not to approach or touch Ashkan, but her voice is stifled by the binding armor. Then, as if responding to an unseen call, the guards begin to turn on each other, fighting fiercely for Ashkan. Apparently, Ashkan has the power to entice people, manipulating them to crave his power, and the enticement spreads like waves very quickly. The only one who's surprisingly unaffected by Ashkan's power is Guido. Seeing the chaos, the mysterious man steps forward. He puts on his executioner mask and takes care of Farmus. Thanks to the forbidden instrument he owns, which is his left hand, he successfully gained control over some soldiers, making them unaffected by Ashkan. Meanwhile, Kugat still finds it hard to believe that the mysterious man is an executioner. But regardless, all evidence points toward him. He then frantically tries to contact his squads through telepathy, but there's no answer. In a shocking twist, Lowell pierces him from behind with a heat weapon. The searing pain radiates through Kugat, leaving him dangerously weakened. It's then revealed that Lowell has been the executioner's right-hand man all along. Eventually, she burns Kugat alive, nearly killing him. Back in the base, Helga is hiding behind one of the pillars. Just as she thinks that it's the end for her, Guido kicks one of the soldiers in the head in her attempt to resist. However, by controlling Farmus's clone, the executioner manages to overpower her with ease. Unable to stand Guido being harassed, Helga comes out of her hiding place. As soon as she appears, Ashkan tries to persuade her to draw him again. But even though letting anyone other than him draw Ashkan would surely lead to a worse outcome, she still can't do that. She lives to protect the world from the demon sword after all. Suddenly, Guido manages to break free from her restraint, surprising even the executioner. She proceeds to use all her might to break Helga's restraint as well. She almost succeeds in bringing Helga out to escape, but too bad, Farmus's alter ego manages to catch Helga's leg, trapping her inside the base. Fortunately, Guido was able to catch Ashkan, so there's still hope of protecting it. Now that Helga has nowhere to go, the executioner ends up using the forbidden instrument on her to gain control over her. Outside the base, Guido takes Ashkan to meet Ashaf. Thankfully, he's fine. According to Ashaf, Kugat saved him, so as soon as he breaks free from the ice, he goes to heal Kugat. Ashaf also knows that the executioner's goal is to obtain the demon sword, so he'll surely come any minute. As if summoned by Ashaf's words, the executioner shows himself before them mere seconds later, bringing his battalion as well as Helga. With his power, he makes the soldiers commit suicide, leaving only a few alive. In the midst of the chaos, Helga seizes an opportunity. When the executioner momentarily lets his guard down, she bolts for freedom and miraculously breaks free. Ashaf quickly tells her and Guido to run away with Ashkan. However, as if possessed by something, Helga suddenly attacks Guido, Ashaf and Kugat. She then goes back to the executioner as soon as she retrieves Ashkan, and she proceeds to hand over Ashkan to the executioner. Kugat frantically tries to talk him out of drawing the sword, but of course, he doesn't listen. He proceeds to draw the sword. Nothing happens yet, but according to the executioner, he knows everything about the sword, including the fact that simply drawing it means nothing. Not only that, he also knows about Helga's clan's history as well as their downfall, and that's because the executioners were the reason for it. Hearing that, Helga comes to her senses, fury igniting within her. However, the executioner manages to subdue her again easily. Taking everyone by surprise, he proceeds to pierce through Helga's heart with Ashkan. Apparently, in order to break Ashkan's seal, he needs the heart of a witch. Now that the seal has been broken, Ashkan reacts violently. Meanwhile, a flood of memories washes over Helga, who's now dying. A few years back, Helga still had a mother and sisters. Her family kept Ashkan in their basement. But somehow, Helga had a strong attachment to him, so she often brought him out. As a result, she also often got scolded. One night when Helga was checking on Ashkan in the basement, she heard a loud rumble. She quickly ran out carrying Ashkan. It turned out that her house had burned down. On top of that, she witnessed her mother killing her own sister. Suddenly, another one of her sisters, who was also a witch like her, pinned her down from behind. Quietly, she said that their whole village was done for. Everyone, including their mother, had gone crazy due to the executioners, so Helga needed to run away with Ashkan and protect the sword as best as she could. Helga's sister then sacrificed herself to be a decoy. Back in the present, after being unsealed, Ashkan immediately unleashes its power. He cuts through the town, the barrier, and also the core's base. Ashaf finally understands Ashkan's real power, the power to destroy the world. In front of them, Ashkan has manifested himself as a huge monster. The executioner orders Ashkan to kill Kugat. However, Ashkan doesn't react. It appears that the executioner misunderstands the true nature of the demon sword. Ashaf reveals that Ashkan was sealed along with his power and brutality. He has no mind or reason. He only has the impulse to destroy. So even with the executioner's forbidden instrument, he won't be able to subdue Ashkan. However, the executioner misinterprets it as the lack of sacrifices for his instrument. He then leaves the scene in his attempt to find the townsfolk to add to his sacrifices. At the same time, Helga starts to open her eyes after being healed by Ashaf. She feels hopeless at the realization that no humans will be able to defeat Ashkan. Out of desperation, Helga just revealed that she has never even had her first kiss. Suddenly, Guido appears, dragging herself toward Helga and Ashaf. Knowing that Guido's safe, an idea comes to Ashaf's mind. Therefore, Ashaf asks Helga if she wants to have her first kiss right now, hinting to Guido that it's finally time for Guido to transform into her true form. Guido has never been so excited. On the other hand, Helga is extremely nervous about it, thinking that Ashaf is the one who's going to kiss her. She doesn't refuse it. Eventually, she closes her eyes and has her first kiss with Guido. The coffin starts shaking. Just as how it unfolded before, a brute monster comes out of it, Guido's true form. Helga opens her eyes, confused about what's happening, but seeing the unconscious female Guido, it seems like she finally realizes that she kissed Guido, not Ashaf. Not only Helga, but everyone else there, including the executioner, also wonder what's happening as Guido's presence is just too strong. Ever since the real Guido was awakened, even Ashkan has stopped moving. The real Guido starts striding toward Ashkan. Helga frantically tries to remind Ashaf that no matter how, the demon sword can't be defeated by any human. He can pierce any object and any creature, without exception. There's a reason the Dauntless Witch sealed him. In response, Ashaf calmly says that he knows that. However, Guido isn't just any human. As the two speak right now, Guido manages to repel Ashkan's attack, which is theoretically impossible. To add to the shock, Kugat's Great Elemental even protects itself when Guido comes near it. Once again, Ashkan unleashes a ferocious strike at Guido. Yet with remarkable ease, Guido counters the assault. Kugat also can't stand still. With the Great Elemental, he forms a giant iceberg above Ashkan. Though Ashkan can cut through the ice effortlessly, the synergy between Kugat and Guido changes the game. With Guido's help, Kugat has the chance to manipulate the ice, making it more possible to use it against Ashkan. At last, they succeed in diverting Ashkan's attention, creating an opening for Guido to unleash a devastating blow with a massive chunk of ice. Kugat then creates a giant ice monster again. However, Ashkan slices through it with ease, and this time, Ashkan's attack successfully strikes Guido, inflicting deep wounds on him. Ashaf is taken aback by the turn of events, but he quickly realizes that the strength Ashkan displayed earlier was merely a fraction of his true power. He had been sealed for hundreds of years, so it was only natural for his strength to be dulled as soon as he was unsealed. Ashkan, who hasn't moved an inch from the rooftop since he was unsealed, finally jumps down to face Guido directly. His own whim gives Guido the opportunity to restrain him. With his right hand gripping Ashkan to immobilize him, his iron left hand draws back, ready to deliver a finishing blow. Then, with a single thunderous punch, he sends Ashkan flying through the air before he vanishes into non-existence. Somewhere in another corner of the city, the citizens huddle inside a protective barrier. Suddenly, the executioner appears, begging the guards to let him in. But, unbeknownst to him, Ashaf has sent one of his crows to tail him. Once Ashaf confirms the executioner's exact location, he tells Guido where he should attack. Guido flicks a rock toward the executioner's direction, and it manages to accurately cut through the executioner's left arm, his forbidden instrument. He then does it 3 more times, cutting the rest of the executioner's limbs. Later on, Kugat interrogates the executioner and Lowell. He asks the real reason the executioner did all of that. If his mission was solely to retrieve the sword, it could have been easily accomplished without this many casualties. In answer to that, the executioner frankly says that it's his own ambition to possess the sword. In fact, he's not the only one who's obsessed with it. All executioners, or rather, the whole global holy church, want the demon sword. The executioner knew that once Kugat had his hands on the Ashkan, it would never return to him again. So he went to that length to make sure Kugat was not interfering. Ashaf believes he's not lying since executioners work in pairs, yet his pair is nowhere to be seen. He suggests Kugat takes him in, but there's no need to keep him alive. Kugat himself is not planning on killing them. Instead, he turns to Helga and asks her what she wants him to do with them, to which Helga replies, nothing. She's experienced enough suffering and doesn't want to see more in front of her. However, if she can make one request, she still wants Kugat to make them suffer enough to regret they were ever being born. Kugat agrees without asking any questions. He then walks away, taking the 2 culprits with him. Now that the Paladin Corps has left, Ashaf invites Helga to join him. Helga herself doesn't refuse it, but knowing that Ashaf and Guido seek witches' power, she feels like she won't be helpful to them. Considering most of her power goes to maintaining Ashkan's seal, well, now it looks like Ashkan is dead. However, according to Ashaf, a monster as strong as him is likely still alive, considering Guido only punched him with his non-dominant arm. The order might even be able to repair Ashkan. Helga thought that it would be better for the world if Ashkan died, but somehow she feels a strange relief knowing that Ashkan is still alive. Soon after, Ashaf and Helga arrive in a quiet town. They stop before a door that would lead them to the corridors, a special pathway that will deliver Helga to safety. Just outside the door, they find Guido, who seems to have been waiting for them. Before they enter, Ashaf tells Guido to wait there. Guido asks Ashaf to heal his arm, but the latter says there's no need for that since Guido wouldn't need to move for now. He then enters the corridors with Helga. Apparently, Guido didn't agree to the contract spell regarding keeping the secret of what's inside the corridors, so she wasn't allowed in. Outside, several children are making a fuss about seeing a witch. They claim that the witch is making poison to curse people. Without thinking twice, Guido, who overheard their conversation, approaches them and demands them tell where the witch is located. Afraid of Guido, the children agree to guide her to the witch. A few moments later, they arrive in front of a house. The children are too scared to get closer, so Guido opens the gate and enters alone. Then, as if expecting her, the door swings open, showing the suspected witch herself. Without a second thought, Guido lunges forward, ready to assault. However, something is wrong. Her left leg refuses to move. The witch expresses her concern, but Guido isn't swayed. She prepares to attack the witch again, only to be stopped by her cat and dog. When the animals finally release her, the woman kneels in front of Guido, calmly applying a soothing ointment to her cuts. As the wounds fade, Guido realizes that this old woman before her is not a witch at all. Later, Guido and the children find themselves in the old woman's kitchen. She explains that she's just an herbalist, not a witch. Embarrassed, the children apologize by helping her with the kitchen chores. All of a sudden, a strange, unfamiliar figure appears out of nowhere, interrupting them. With a glance, Guido quickly recognizes that he's another executioner. Before she can react, he sweeps his dark robe over her, and in an instant, she, the old woman, and the children vanish from the room. When Guido opens her eyes, the executioner stands before her, explaining that they're now in his own dimension, a hidden world only visible to those who wear a cloak like his. However, he knows that Guido is different, so he allows her to see and hear. This executioner also reveals that he's a brother and the partner of the one who created chaos in Pontevert. He arrived too late to the scene and only saw Guido, Ashaf, and Helga. He followed the three from there, his presence masked by the magic of his robe. After explaining that to Guido, he asks her two questions. First, where is his brother and the forbidden instrument? As he's about to ask his second question, suddenly, another figure appears. She, too, has come with the intention to have a conversation with Guido. Meanwhile, in the corridors, Ashaf is talking to the receptionist there to decide where they'll be going. But then the staff hands Ashaf a letter from the order, the one with a black envelope. The sight of it drains the color from Ashaf's face. He's never looked this fearful before. He knows something is terribly wrong, so without hesitation, he hurries back toward the entrance. Helga questions why he panics so much, to which Ashaf replies that it's because there's a witch in this town, not just any witch, but Angela Ann Huel, the very one who cursed Guido. Reaching the entrance, he finds it empty with Guido nowhere in sight. He isn't surprised though, since he knew this would happen. According to him, the cursed and the cursor have a special bond, and once the threads of fate between them are pulled together, there's no one who can interfere with their encounter. Ashaf also admits that he made a mistake by making Guido's body weak in various places when he treated her. He did it to make sure Guido wouldn't cause any trouble, but because of it, Guido wouldn't stand a chance against Angela. And now, in another dimension, Guido can't contain her excitement. At last, she stands face to face with the witch she's hunted for so long. Angela reveals that she entered this dimension by replicating the executioner's cloak, a revelation that leaves the executioner in shock. His signature cloak is a forbidden instrument, not a simple magical tool. Yet Angela managed to know its power and copied it with only a glance. He also can't comprehend how Guido manages to stand and even walk to fight Angela in his dimension, as he's taken almost all of her senses. Yet, unfortunately, all of Guido's struggle turns out to be futile moments later. In the end, Guido lies defeated, battered, and exhausted. Once Guido is no longer able to fight back, Angela announces that she'll leave a trail so that Guido can come after her again. And once that happens, Angela promises that she'll get more serious in finishing what they started decades ago. She then erases the dimension, sending Guido back to the real world. Ashaf and Helga spot Guido almost immediately, sprawled on the ground outside the herbalist's house. Near her lies the gruesome remains of the executioner, On his chest, there's a mysterious code written with blood. Ashraf then reveals to Helga that Angela is one of the origins. At first, Helga can't believe it because witches, bound by fate, can only live up to 200 years. However, Angela is different. Angela's other name is the Eternal Witch. She defies age and wields a power that few can match. Ashraf is also certain that the bloodied code on the executioner's chest was left by Angela. Later, Ashraf steps into Guido's room, intending to tend to her wounds. But Guido just glares at him coldly. She knows it was Ashraf who left her leg paralyzed earlier, leaving her vulnerable. Unable to forgive him, she lashes out, assaulting him back until he nearly falls out of the window. Defeated, Ashraf ends up admitting to his actions, but in his defense, it was to protect Guido herself. He insists he'd never act against her interests, hoping that she'll see the reasoning behind his choices. As Guido calms down, Ashraf is momentarily transported back to their first encounter 3 years ago. Back then, Ashraf was being dispatched to a village on the 5th continent, far from magic's influence. Interestingly, a witch had lived there for a long time, though she hadn't caused any conspicuous disturbance. Strange incidents had been occurring one after another recently, the ones that likely involved magic. Therefore, the Order thought that taking the witch into custody was necessary. On the day of Ashraf's arrival, Falvel Farmington, the suspected witch, and her younger brother Owent were just walking casually when suddenly 2 middle-aged men approached them. One of them furiously accused Falvel and Owent of doing something to his cow with magic. Apparently, 2 days prior, there was a peculiar case of a cow falling from the sky, already in pieces. In the middle of the ruckus, Craig, Owent's friend, appeared to defend the siblings. Coincidentally, Ashraf also happened to be there, so he tried to get more insight into the situation. According to Owent, people in the village always accused Falvel of being a witch, but the truth was, Falvel couldn't even cast a spell. She was also mute, unable to say a word. After hearing that, Ashraf sent the 2 men away with magic. He then turned to speak with Falvel, but their conversation was abruptly interrupted again. This time, not by some random men, but by Guido. She appeared behind Ashraf and upon spotting Falvel immediately launched into an attack upon spotting Falvel. Ashraf reacted fast, building a barrier to protect himself and the children. Unfazed, Guido revealed the witch's mark on her neck, thrusting it into Falvel's view. Falvel's reaction was unmistakable. She recognized the mark, a realization that only fueled Guido's fury further. Then, without a warning, a huge monster emerged to protect Falvel. It pushed Guido far away across the lake. Ashraf assumed the creature belonged to Falvel. The villagers who witnessed the spectacle also shared the same belief, convinced that Falvel controlled the monstrous being. Later, the siblings invited Ashraf to their home. Owent confided that they had no parents and that the villagers had ostracized them. Fortunately, the headman had welcomed them with open arms. Thanks to his kindness, Falvel was able to brew tea from the leaves grown in the garden and mountains, selling it to the headman's friends. When Ashraf tasted the tea, he was astounded by its exceptional flavor. He then mockingly offered a cup to Guido, who sat calmly tied to a chair, surprisingly unfazed by her predicament. After finishing the tea, Ashraf asked Owent whether it was true that Falvel was mute. Owent confirmed it, explaining that every witch in their family had never been able to speak. Hearing that, Ashraf finally understood why Falvel couldn't cast magic. He explained that the most basic technique to cast magic was by drawing spell runes. However, there were exceptions to this rule, and it seemed like Falvel's lineage was of that exception. One of the origins, Luna Farmington, also known as the Mystic Witch, performed all spells using words, so Falvel's inability to speak naturally explained her inability to use magic. However, Guido remained skeptical. If Falvel couldn't cast magic, then who had summoned the monster that had sent her flying? In response, Ashraf said that there could be an enemy who took advantage of the situation. They could have made it as if Falvel had created the monster so that Falvel could be framed whenever a magic-related incident occurred. Ashraf proceeded to ask if there was a recent newcomer to the village. Craig himself admitted that he and his father just moved in 6 months earlier, but Owent defended him, saying that Craig's father had also been helping them along with the headman. Nevertheless, 6 months couldn't really be called recent, considering the incidents only happened within the past month. Since there were no more clues, Ashraf then formally introduced himself and invited Falvel to come with him to the Order so that he could protect her and her brother. Later on, Ashraf departed from the siblings' home, bringing Guido with him. As the two walked, Ashraf reminded Guido of Falvel's expression upon seeing Guido's witch's mark. He thought that it was clear Falvel knew something about it. There was even a possibility that Falvel also had the mark somewhere on her body, or that her voice was sealed away by the same curse. Ashraf then hinted at the possibility that there was another way to break the curse, an alternative to the two well-known methods. Suddenly, they heard an uproar. Ashaf sprinted toward the source of the commotion, where Craig stood. He announced that the monster had returned and killed the headman. Not only that, someone who called himself a witch-hunting expert showed up and headed toward Falvel's house. In an instant, Ashaf connected the dots. Craig was speaking of an executioner. Ashaf quickly ran back. Craig tried to follow him, but surprisingly, Ashaf turned to Craig and shot him several times. He then made a shocking announcement. Executioners always worked in pairs, and Craig was the other half of the deadly duo. Undeterred, Craig sat up, unharmed by the gunfire because his monster had protected him. He smirked before fully unleashing his monster to attack Ashaf. He then put on his executioner mask. Eventually, Ashaf was defeated. When he could no longer move, Guido approached him, demanding an answer from Ashaf regarding the third way to break the curse. Ashaf agreed to answer, but on one condition. Guido needed to save Falvel since she would need her to break the curse. Meanwhile, the other executioner had stormed into Falvel's house, accompanied by some angry villagers. Falvel herself was nowhere to be found as she had been gathering tea flowers on the mountain. Upon returning home, she was met with a horrific sight. Her house was engulfed in fire and Owen lay lifeless on the ground. Overcome with despair, she fell to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks. Not long after, Craig showed up, meeting up with his executioner partner. The partner revealed that just before his death, Owen disclosed that the reason Falvel couldn't use her power was because of a curse. He then approached Falvel and pulled out her tongue. Owen was right. On her tongue there was a witch's curse mark, similar to the one etched on Guido's neck, meaning that the executioners wouldn't be able to steal her power unless they could break the seal, which was near impossible. They had no choice but to dispose of her. But before any action was taken, Craig's partner took off his mask, revealing the face that Falvel knew very well, the face of Sven, Craig's father, and the person she had always trusted. The truth struck her like a bolt of lightning, and her tears flowed freely due to it. In that moment, Guido appeared on the scene. Upon her entrance, she decapitated some of the villagers. Positioning herself between Falvel and Sven, she told the former to run away quickly, but Falvel was frozen in place. Then in just a few moves, Sven managed to defeat Guido, pushing her away. Thankfully, Ashaf appeared just right in time. He told Falvel to listen to him if she wanted to survive. A few moments later, Falvel approached the battered Guido. Guido's anger flared at the sight of her, and once again, she commanded Falvel to run. But in an unexpected twist, Falvel pushed Guido toward her and kissed her. Guido's true form then erupted from the coffin. In just one punch, Guido was able to get rid of Sven, throwing him into the burning house and saving Ashaf, who was almost completely defeated. Now that his partner was defeated, Craig proceeded to take matters into his own hands. He unleashed his monster again in his attempt to strike Guido. However, even his monster couldn't withstand Guido's power. Suddenly, Sven jumped him. As he tried his best to defeat Guido, he ordered the villagers to capture Falvel quickly. The villagers obeyed. They ran toward Falvel, ready to capture her. But then, taking everyone aback, Falvel started to speak. She commanded all of them to stop moving. All at once, the villagers became frozen. Falvel proceeded to command the fire to be quelled. Then, instantly, the fire that was burning her house was extinguished. This was Falvel's true witch power, the power to control anything in the world with words. Apparently, Guido's female body was also a witch's body, so when Falvel kissed her, Falvel's curse was broken as well. Falvel then approached Sven, who trembled in terror before her. Once again, she made a command for Sven to be gone. Then just as she wished, Sven faded away within seconds, leaving nothing behind. As for Craig, she didn't have to do anything to him since he ended up dead anyway due to Guido's punch earlier. Sometime later, Owen was on his feet again, feeling better than ever thanks to Ashaf's healing magic. He and his sister were preparing to leave the city. They met up with Ashaf to say goodbye to each other. Guido, who had turned back to her female form, was also there. Ashaf asked her what she was going to do, considering she still needed to break the curse permanently. He suggested she join the Order, as the organization might be able to provide her with information regarding witches. Returning to the present after recalling his first encounter with Guido, Ashaf admits there is one thing he has always wanted to teach her, and that is love. The scene shifts to the two of them going somewhere by car. On the way, Ashaf explains that in this world, there are 8 continents. The global Holy Church has its headquarters on the first continent, where the influence of magic is the strongest. As they move eastward from there, they have the second continent, third continent, and so on. Naturally, the farther the continent is from the first continent, The advancement of magic also decreases. However, there are some regions which are exceptions to that. One of them is an isolated island between the 7th and 8th continents. On that island, there's a chasm that leads to other worlds, which is where they're going. People can book a trip there, which costs a lot and requires privilege. Not only that, but travelers also need to be prepared to lose their lives. But thanks to the Order, the two managed to tick all of the boxes. The chasm is also known as the Fall. It has 17 levels, each is connected to a separate world. According to Ashaf, the code that Angela left back then were letters from the Fall. Therefore, there is a possibility that Angela is hiding there. At the very least, they can still find a lead to Angela there. A few moments later, the pair arrive on the 4th level. A server welcomes them. He warns that this level is very dangerous, especially for travelers. He then takes them to the garments room for them to change clothes. Inside, Ashaf requests middle-ranking garments, along with a few high-ranking outfits to attend the social event. Additionally, he asks for several sets of entirely black clothing. The fashion coordinator's expression shows clear alarm upon hearing Ashaf's request. Anyone could tell that it's not the best idea to wear such attire here. However, Ashaf knows the consequences, and he still wants them regardless. Soon after, Ashaf and Guido are seen fully dressed in their all-black attire. After walking down a corridor, they finally reach a grandiose door. Ashaf opens it and announces that they've now arrived at the 4th level. Orlencia Set, the world where vampires live. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.